Today's snake river fly, we're going to tie up some spring streamers using some epoxy and a snake river fly product called Crinkles On. Produces pretty flashy minnows, good bait fish patterns for the springtime when you need max visibility out of your bug. So quick introduction to the materials. We've got a salmon steelhead hook here. This one's a size 2. I also like them in a 4, sometimes a 6. The first fly we're going to do today is an epoxy minnow, where we actually use epoxy all the way down the body. Do a little bit of marabou in the tail with some crinkles on in the tail. And then we're going to put a tube braid up through the fly as the body. It creates a nice scale effect on the bug. And we'll use some marker to color that up. Some 3D eyeballs epoxied on and some gill plates, and then we should be good. So we'll jump right into it. The other thing I'm going to do to this fly to give it a little better appearance with the epoxy is use monofilament as the thread. When you wrap this, it stays pretty translucent, especially when you epoxy over it. It almost disappears, and it's not a fibrous thread. It's single strand, builds up quickly, but has some good properties to it. It's about 1 pound strength. If you're looking to determine what pound strength it is, it's about 1 pound. Go ahead and get the thread started. Put a little bit of lead on here. The hook itself has the wraparound portion, and I'm going to line that up with the lead so that we're essentially doing the same thickness there. Wrap that back there. Just going to lay down a decent lead base here. You could use some other material if you wanted to, but lead works great. I'm going to tie that down and then double check to make sure I can slide the braid tubing over it. Yep, there we go, and you can see how that tubing just slides right on there. I'll pull that back off, put a tail on here. First material I'm going to use is the Pearl Crinkles On, available at Snake River Fly. Has a kinky texture to it, and when it's pulled back it holds a nice stiff shape. So I'll tie a little bit of that off the back. And then I'm going to tie on 1 piece of marabou. Just pull the tips out here. Once again, that thread allows a lot of the color to come through. Tie that off, tie it down. Okay, then what we're going to do, I'm going to apply the tubing. I'll slide it back all the way so where it starts to sheath onto the marabou. And then I'm going to take my monofilament, jump a little bit in front of that, right where there's the pinch there, so as the fly gets used, a little bit of that will fray. And I'm going to do a whip finish right off the bat. I need my longer whip finisher here. Give me one moment. Thank you, sir. Long whip finisher is a little more handy when you're wrapping in on bugs like that. I'll just do a little whip finish there. We're going to epoxy over that. Once we're done with the fly, I'm going to trim that there. Then I'm going to pull that minnow body forward. Reattach my monofilament thread. Trim that out. Can trim off the extra ribbon there. Get that stuff out of there. Okay. So we've got the head started there. What I'm going to do is whip finish again. Then what we do, to give it a little bit of color on just the top portion, I'm going to use two markers. This one is brown. Give the top of that bug one little run of that. Then I'm going to use a green and do the same, try to get the same spot. It gives it a really nice scaled effect on top of the fly, which we'll epoxy over. Okay, trim up any loose fibers you might have blocking your eye. You don't necessarily want to epoxy over those. Okay. If you want to put in a couple gill slits, I use a little bit of an acrylic red paint on a toothpick, and I'll come in on the bottom portion. Put in a little gill plate down there. Then I'm going to epoxy the eyes on, or glue, super glue the eyes on, and then we'll epoxy the bug and be done. The eyeballs I'm using on this guy are a 3D eye, multicolored. These are pretty small. They'll look good on this size fly, and I'll typically adhere those with super glue. Put a little drop there, a little drop on that side, and then we're going to drop these eyeballs on. These guys are pretty small. Going with a little bigger. Get those on there, let them set up for a second, and I'll go right into mixing the epoxy. I use a 5-minute Z-epoxy. I mix it for about 1.5 minutes. I apply it for about 1 to 2 minutes, and then I twist for about a minute, and it's set up. And then the key to when we apply our epoxy to the bug is keep it thin. We're just looking to cover the fly. We're not looking to really bulk up the fly. Really all we're trying to do is put a nice sheen on it, get a nice coverage with the epoxy. So I've got my mixture here. I don't know if you can see that, but I've got my toothpick. I'm going to take a shard of that on my toothpick and just apply that bead of that onto the bug. I quickly like to do the eyeballs and get them taken care of. Get a little more here. The key is not introducing a lot of air bubbles. And then I'll hit around those eyeballs. It's really nice to have a rotary. It's pretty much a must for an epoxy bug like this. Come back to the head, make sure it looks the way I want. Avoid getting epoxy in the eye of the hook. And then I'm going to come back onto that rear end there, make sure my epoxy is starting to even out. And you can see it's tightening up a little bit. Come all the way back onto that back end, onto those loose fibers. And now we're 3 to 4 minutes into the mixing process on the epoxy. It should be close. We're going to have to sit here and watch it for a little bit. It will sag for another minute or two, but once it sets up, we should be good to go. Yeah, so we got the epoxy to set up here. It only takes a couple minutes. You just want to keep an eye on it till it has set. It's a 5-minute process total at room temperature, and you can see the nice scale effect. The effect that putting a little bit of paint in is the gills. Just a really neat bug. They're quick. They're once you've done a couple, they're pretty hard to screw up, and they look great. Hold up for a long time. Represent small minnows. They catch everything from carp and trout to bass and other warm water species. So that's the epoxy minnow.